Dear colleagues, good morning. I know we're still waking up, so we'll try to make an interesting discussion for you. First, thank you very much for my co-panelists here, to Colile George, the Secretary General of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, Grant Forgentini, CEO of Accenture Positive Technologies, Klaus Kogel, Director General of the German Bundesrat, and Hugo de Rosas, Parliamentary Secretary of the Chamber of Deputies of Mexico. The topic of the panel today is about the legislative procedure and data adaptations for the use of AI in Parliament. I will invite all of my colleagues here to share an opening presentation of 10 minutes each, and then we are going to have a discussion on the topic as well. So without further ado, I'll open with you, Grant. So the guiding question for this presentation is, how can AI transform legislative procedures through different document analysis and structured parliamentary data? Feel free to use the floor for 10 minutes.
Thanks, Luis. Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, in my panel, I talked about preparing data for the use in AI tools and how information layers need to be built. Today, I'm going to turn that around and talk about how we get there. That's one of the biggest challenges, is getting to that point. At Accenture, I'm the CEO of Accenture. We're a small company. We build legislative drafting tools, and we've been doing it for decades. Our approach is to use XML, and we've been a proponent of XML for decades now. That's why I work on the Ecommentoso committee with Monica. I don't see her here, but she's out somewhere. We've been part of the Ecommentoso ecosystem now for 16 years. But there's always been a problem. How do we get from where jurisdictions are today to where we want to be? It's a very difficult task. One of the steps we have to do is a document analysis, figure out how to take the legacy processes, the legacy data, and move it into the new world. I've done myself many document analyses. It's an incredibly difficult task. It's something that takes months. In some cases, it takes years to get done. We're deploying a system right now that we started working on before the pandemic. And now we're at the deployment stage. It's taken that long. Part of the problem is you're dealing with an information set that has evolved over decades, sometimes centuries, and you have to be able to analyze all that data. We've always struggled to hire people who can do this. Invariably, they get overwhelmed. They can't wrap their head around the complexity of the problem, and then they quit. It's that complex. But all of a sudden, we've come up with a solution. And that solution is to start using AI skills to help us do that document analysis. It's still early going for us. We just started doing this, but I feel confident in saying that we can eliminate at least 80% of the task using AI skills. We're using a platform called Skillyo, skillyo.ai. You have not heard of it. I can confidently say that. Unless you were at my presentation yesterday, you've never heard of skillyo.ai. And the reason is that it's brand new, and we are maybe the first real users of the system. So let's talk a little bit about how we're using AI skills. Typically, what we do when we do a document analysis is we pour through thousands of documents, looking for variations in structure, trying to understand the taxonomies, the ontologies, and we analyze everything for months and months and months. We ask for lots and lots of samples. Any other documentation we can get our hands on, we analyze. Drafting manuals, anything that's been written, we analyze. I do this. This is what I've been doing for decades. I get overwhelmed. I can't keep track of all these things. So the end result is suboptimal just because of the complexity. As I said, we struggle to hire for this skill. Now we have AI skills to help us. Through AI skills, what we do is we describe through a prompt the process I do. We tell the system through a prompting what I do. We give it the assets that it can work on. Once we define the skill, we press the button. The system chews for a few minutes. You get frustrated because it's taking so long. And you wait and you wait and you wait. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, it shoots out a document analysis. And you go, about time. You've just done what it would have taken me 6 months to a year to do. And I was getting impatient because it took a few minutes. And the results are amazing. They're not perfect. They never will be perfect. We accept that. But neither are the results I did over 6 to 12 months. The way I think of this is it's like I've now got an exoskeleton that I can put on, and it gives me a new superpower. I'm the legislative data Iron Man. I can put this suit on, and I can do what I was always doing, but on a much grander scale, much more capable scale. And the other benefit is that this skill is transferable. We have 3 people in the company that can do a document analysis. All of us have been doing this for decades. Last week, we delivered 2 document analyses done by 2 people, including Marty back there, 3 people, including Marty back there. None of them had ever done a document analysis before. But we were able to deliver 3 of them, or 2 of them, with just a few days, weeks of effort. It's that amazing. Our first skill is defined to take a set of documents and drafting manuals and come up with a single coherent information model that we can then send to the customer and say, is this how you draft your documents? Is there anything we've missed? And we can work from that. The next step is to take that and create another skill, second skill, that will take that documentation that we've come up with and the corrections and map that into a Komontozo. And then we can again iterate on that, make sure we've got it right. The third skill will be then to take those Komontozo documents and to configure LegisPro, our XML editor. Each one of these is these separate skills, but putting them together, we get from here to there. This has been the holy grail for us. We call it auto-config. Being able to configure documents, configure the editor very quick and do conversions very quick. And all of a sudden, we have the capability. We weren't expecting this capability. It's not really auto-config, it's an AI-assisted config. But one important point, these skills aren't replacing anybody. They're enabling people. So they're creating jobs for us. We can scale. We can now do this on a much broader scale than we were able to do before. So AI doesn't have to always replace jobs. It empowers people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant, for the opening presentation. I'd like to recognize now Klaus Kogel, also for the time of 10 minutes for his opening presentation on the topic on how our new technologies are impacting the legislative process in your parliament, following up this presentation on the possibilities by Grant. Klaus, feel free to use the floor for 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Luis. Yes, how are new technologies impacting the legislative process in the Bundesrat, that's my parliament? Before I answer this question, I'd like to give you some basic information about the German parliamentary system because it helps you understand the technologies we use and we have implemented. First of all, our system is bicameral with the Bundestag and the Bundesrat, the Bundestag elected every 4 years. But the Bundesrat, by contrast, is structured completely differently because the Bundesrat represents the interests of the 16 federal states. Germany is a federal system. And in the Bundesrat, the 16 federal states have the possibility to participate in the national legislative process. Members are the members of the 16 federal state governments. We have no political groups in the Bundesrat. When you look in the plenary, the federal states sit arranged by federal states. The votes have to be cast by each state by a show of hands and by one vote caster. And this voting procedure is important to understand the first technology we have implemented. And the first technology is a vote counting assistance. Up to 4 years ago, the votes in the Bundesrat were counted manually by the speaker, assisted by the Secretary General. And the vote counting assistance consists of 16 small cameras being placed in the whole plenary hall, and they cover all the 16 seat blocks of the federal states. And in a vote, the cameras register exactly which federal state has voted how. It's a motion detection technology, and the result is transmitted to a small screen on the desk of the presidency table, and the vote results is available within seconds. The accuracy rate is about 99%. The time saved is immense, but however, there is a plausibility check by the speaker and the Secretary General if the result is correct. So there is at least some human control in the end, which is performed. Another technology we use, this is a speech recognition software, Whisper. I think some of you might even use it in your parliaments. We've been using it for over a year now, and we use it for drafting the minutes of committee meetings and plenary meetings. My colleagues from the Bundestag have tried to use it in plenary meetings. There it was not possible because there are more than 600 members, with us only 69, so you have exclamations. Sometimes there are, noises, and the Whisper system cannot clearly define who is speaking, what's happening. It's different in our chamber because there's a very matter-of-fact atmosphere, and so the system works flawlessly, and we have made very good experiences. So the sessions are recorded. Whisper transcribes audio into text, and then the Bundesrat staff authorizes the final edit. Minutes are available at the end of the same day, and saves a lot of time because it lasted 2-3 days before when you did it all manually. So here is also some human control in the end. We use two other technologies not necessarily related to the legislative process. I'd like to present you during shortly. First one is an AI tool for legal tasks. It's an LLM trained exclusively on legal data. It's operated by Germany's biggest publisher of specialist legal literature. It's a closed system. It works fast with high accuracy, and it's used by our parliamentary legal service in order to provide support in legal and court disputes, especially in private law or labor law, and the experiences are fantastic with it. The second tool is used for public procurement procedures, which are very time-consuming and can give you work for several weeks, especially for drafting tenders in the procurement procedures. So these are two tools we use, but not related to the legislative process. At the moment, we are working on a new technology that will have a decisive impact on the legislative process in Germany, and it's a project which is called e-legislation. The aim of this project is a complete digitization of the national legislative process at the federal level, from draft to promulgation, on a digitally supported platform where all the players in the national legislative process work together across departments in a single system, and this system offers seamless processes, and the system is expected to be operational at the end of 2027. But there are challenges implementing and establishing this system. First one is identifying procedures, workflows, documents. Alone for the Bundesrat procedures, we have about 100 types of documents that have to be mapped for this digital process. Then it's the complex federal structure of Germany. A nationwide digital workflow must take into account the multitude of players involved in the national legislative process, which is the Chancellery, 14 federal ministries, the two legislative organs, the Bundestag, the Bundesrat, 16 federal states, who can submit draft bills to the Bundesrat, who can submit amendments to the procedure, and the federal president for the signing and promulgation of the law adopted. All these players have up to now different IT systems and partly developed our own solutions. And now we start providing technical organizational interfaces and to make all these different systems interoperable, which is quite a challenge and which needs time. And we do this with an external service operator because we couldn't do it on our own. And the challenge is, like some of you already pointed out yesterday and the day before, that we are specialists in legislative procedure. We are not IT specialists, and we have to get a link to the IT specialists not only in our parliaments, but also to these IT companies who are assisting us. Our IT sections in the parliament, they know how the parliament works, but if you take these external service providers, they have no idea about legislative processes, about how parliaments work. And so our task is to explain our work to them, which is a hard task and very time consuming. And we have about 3 to 4 meetings, about several hours every week since several years. And it is a challenge bringing all these actors, all these players under one roof and developing this solution. The next, another challenge is the budget. Because, as you know, we live in times of budgetary restraints, and the project is funded by the national budget. And the project e-legislation began several years ago. And for last year, when we had the budget discussions for 2026, it was contested. And the budget committee in the Bundestag said, okay, why do we need this project? In the end, the finances were secured. We can continue, but it is a challenge to keep the project financed in the next years. And it also means national budget. It means no funding for the federal states. So the federal states have adopted their own procedures, their own technical systems, and they say, why giving them up? Why going on the platform? And who gives us the money to go on the platform? And so they either say, we want the national budget, us included in the national budget, financing that we can participate in the platform, or they say, if we don't get the money, we send our documents in our formats to the Bundesrat, and the Bundesrat has to take care of mapping them or transforming them so that they can be used on the platform in the digital process. So that's a challenge. So you see, this is a big project, and for the time being, we've implemented small selective measures. The legislative process as a whole is still running with the traditional procedures in operation, but with a decisive turning point at sight at the end of next year, which will be this e-legislation process. So when we're talking about it next year, I can give you some first results, how it's going, and what will be our first experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus, for your opening presentation as well. I'd like to recognize now Kholili George, the Secretary General of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. Kholili, you have 10 minutes for your opening presentation as well.
No, thank you very much, Louis, and good morning to all the fellow participants and dear colleagues in the panel. I think similar to the background that Klaus has shared on the German Parliament, we are also structured likewise. We have 2 houses of Parliament, the National Assembly, that is about 400 members, and we have a federal structured house in the form of National Council of Provinces, and we have 9 provinces. So their voting and participation is structured fairly different to the representative structure at the National Assembly. In that house, we have 100 members. So in total, we have 500 members. That represents the people. So 32 years as a new democracy, we have experimented quite a lot around many areas that were more foundational to the dismantling of the apartheid system in our country. So we're still a democracy at a very infancy stage. Even application of systems is informed by that, to try go through a trove of documentations that were historical, pre-94 and post-94. And one of the much celebrated issue in our country, and sometimes it gets referred to across the continent and to a large extent globally, is the robust nature of our constitutional order as a country. And similar to Namibia, we're just at the tail end of Africa to be one country ahead of them to receive our political freedom. So it enabled us to sample across the board a number of constitutional systems and so on. I'm calling it robust in the sense that one of the foundational issues of our constitutional order is the centrality of the people in the democratic order, lawmaking in particular, and the Constitution places a two-test scenario for achieving public participation in the lawmaking. That is meaningful participation and adequate participation. So if any of those variables is seen not to have been adequately exhausted, the Constitutional Court strikes a number of bills. So we have a lot of bills that have gone through that. So one of the issues that we are focusing on the applications of digital system, artificial intelligence, is to expand the frontiers of public participation, to go beyond the traditional forms of town hall meetings, advertising of things, and so on. And we are now looking at how do we ensure that we apply systems for people to make online submissions. Because when people petition, they will come to our doorsteps as Parliament, and that's about 20 people, especially on contentious legislation like national health insurance system, which we have had as a country recently, and is back in court, highly contested. So online submission is one of those areas that allows us to at least have adequate consultation mechanism. The second one is the ability to have tracking of bills through the legislative process. And also when we do nominations for appointments of public office bearers, institutions, so people are also able to do online submissions around that. Tracking of resolutions, both for international treaties that needs to be ratified in the House. We can now track in various areas, where are these bills, what does it mean for us as a country, the treaties and so on. And lastly, within our internal mechanism, the House resolution tracking. Where are the resolutions that require responses by ministers and so on. So these are some of the areas that we have started implementing, and we're now expanding them to committees to look at how the committee system can also track its oversight instruments to be in a position to determine whether it is exercising the executive scrutiny that it is placed on each of our committees. So at the level of AI applications in our Parliament, we are still at a very foundational stage, I must say. As we speak now, we have set out our digital architecture in terms of the policy framework, and we are sampling to start one application now as at end of June in terms of artificial intelligence to look at AI-powered chat box for our website, so that people can have an interactive session where they will be able to receive a guided service 24 hours, but much more on their own natural language. At the same time, it will be able to make reference to what use sources has it placed reliance on, so that people can have the confidence. We think that that will go a long way to deal with the democratic tension that normally arises, that the trust deficit declines, even if something is not the role of Parliament. People always look at Parliament as, how did it happen in your in your face as parliament and so on. So these things would now help us to assist in improving the qualitative dimension of engagements by the citizens. So by end of June, we'll be implementing that in terms of our documentation, and also allow people to get responses 24 hours a day through these AI-assisted areas. We think that some of the key results is that even our workload to staff, theoretically it will reduce. At the same time, it will improve how our response handling meets the standards of efficiency and so on. We currently use Microsoft Copilot as an AI tool, and also to look at Copilot assistance in our programs to make sure that we are able to start working on micrograph data setups and ensure that it helps us to work much more smarter in committees and help members. The second dimension is on enhancing research and evidence-based decision-making. One of the areas that routinely members will do, we have about 38 committees in one house. The other house has got 10 committees, but they are much more multidisciplinary in structure. And it's easier to say in Parliament you had 95% response rate by the executive when they come to appear in the House. We can celebrate that. That's a quantitative dimension. But qualitatively, what is our standard to say there has been meaningful response by a member? We haven't had that system. So part of structuring questions for members is to help them frame the right questions. To frame the right questions, so at the committee that looks at the quality of responses can easily say the 98% response rate also responds to the issues that members must then go to citizens to do that. So one of the areas that we think we're going to apply is around the Microsoft Fabric, to make sure that supported with some of these instruments will help us to improve our dashboard around evidence-based oversight. In that instance, we think members will receive evidence-based information to make sure that during deliberations, they are able to do better. The last part is on strengthening transparency and accountability, which is one of those major areas that I think anywhere in the world, parliaments always struggle around that. We don't have absence of receiving information from people. The issue is the depth at which we go through to determine the quality of the standard that citizens expect from our parliament. And at the level of participation, live streaming is one area that in all our committees, they are open, except committees where the rules of the House says this one can be open. Committees like Joint Standing Committees on Intelligence, when they deal with sensitive issues for the country, then those ones are not open. But live streaming generally during our plenary sessions. The second one is again use of these instruments around AI chat box to make sure that citizens and researchers can track legislation. And we think that theoretically that will go a long way to improve the public trust that is very necessary to improve the quality of our democratic order as a country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleague George, for your opening presentation. I'd like to recognize now my friend Hugo de Rosas, Parliamentary Secretary of the Chamber of Deputies of Mexico. Hugo, you have 10 minutes.
Muchas gracias, Luis. Muy buenos días a todas y todos. En primer lugar, quiero dar un muy sincero agradecimiento a Luis y a Busola Tech por su hospitalidad, también al Parlamento de la República de Irlanda, a Sirian. Muchas gracias por la invitación y por su hospitalidad. Creo que habla mucho de las sociedades, de la forma en la que discuten sus problemas colectivos y acerca de lo que están discutiendo. Es muy alentador que funcionarios parlamentarios de distintos países que se encuentran aquí estén discutiendo de un tema, un problema que no solo presenta grandes perspectivas hacia el futuro, sino también presenta grandes retos en la actualidad. Y respecto al procedimiento legislativo, Estoy frente a especialistas connotados en el mismo. Creo que podemos decir que ese procedimiento para hacer leyes no es otra cosa que la exposición ordenada y racional de argumentos para tomar una decisión colectiva. Ahora, esa forma de discutir y tomar decisiones colectivas se viene realizando al menos desde hace 7, 8 siglos, desde el Parlamento británico en el siglo XII o XIII, que se reúnen las asambleas representativas, están tomando decisiones de esta forma. ¿Cómo ha impactado la tecnología en esa forma de discusión pública en centros de poder político y la toma de decisiones públicas para responder a problemas colectivos? Cada país tiene desde luego sus peculiaridades, sus rasgos muy concretos para adoptar esas soluciones, pero sin embargo se ha encontrado siempre la forma de adaptar las respuestas tecnológicas a esos procedimientos que, insisto, tienen 7, 8 siglos. Por ejemplo, de manera muy interesante me llamó mucho la atención que mi querido colega Klaus en Alemania decía que hasta apenas hace 4 años se contaban de manera manual los votos en una de en sus asambleas, en el procedimiento habitual. La forma de recuento de los votos en los parlamentos se ha hecho así desde hace siglos. Sin embargo, la tecnología ha encontrado formas o soluciones de darle certeza a un procedimiento crucial para resolver un problema público, como es aprobar una ley y que los votos se cuenten y se cuenten bien. Quiero en esto compartir la experiencia mexicana, que seguramente la comparten otros países. En México tenemos un sistema de votación con reconocimiento facial que se impacta en un tablero electrónico. Eso no representa mayor problema. Sin embargo, el reto está en el tamaño del Congreso mexicano. El Congreso mexicano, al igual que los parlamentos que son representados aquí por mis queridos colegas, es un sistema bicameral con un Senado de la República que tiene 128 integrantes y una Cámara de Diputados que tiene 500 integrantes. En el caso de la Cámara de Diputados, estamos frente a la tercera asamblea más grande del continente americano. Perdón, dije tercera, es la segunda, solo debajo de Brasil. Brasil tiene 513 miembros, su Cámara Baja, su Cámara de Diputados, después la Cámara de Diputados de México que tiene 500, la Cámara de Representantes de Estados Unidos, siendo un país mucho más poblado que México y que Brasil tiene 435 integrantes. El tamaño de esa asamblea representa varios problemas técnicos para la gestión de las decisiones públicas al interior del Parlamento. El reto más agudo lo enfrentamos, por ejemplo, en la pandemia. ¿Y con qué lo solucionamos? Con tecnología, con innovación tecnológica. La pandemia, como todos ustedes bien saben y recordarán, le golpeó al corazón del funcionamiento de los parlamentos. Es esencial, está en la esencia de los parlamentos reunirse en un solo lugar, deliberar y tomar una decisión colectiva. La pandemia impedía que eso se realizara. No podíamos reunirnos más allá de 5, 8 personas en el mismo lugar sin que no hubiera riesgo de que nos contagiáramos. ¿Cómo se solucionó eso? Se innovó con reuniones virtuales, con plataforma Zoom, se podían contar los votos a través de la pantalla. Pero ¿cómo lográbamos, por ejemplo, en el caso de México, que un mosaico de Zoom con 500 rostros pudiera apreciarse cómo levantaban la mano? Se diseñó de manera muy simple una aplicación en el teléfono celular con reconocimiento facial y los legisladores podían votar desde sus oficinas, incluso en el lugar más recóndito del país, en la frontera con Estados Unidos, podían tomar sus decisiones y la decisión se impactaba en el tablero, en el salón de sesiones. Incluso a través de la plataforma Zoom, proyectándola y generando una interfaz con los monitores dentro del salón de sesiones, podían debatir estando en sus oficinas o en sus casas, resguardados, y la discusión se realizaba en la sede del salón de sesiones. Esta respuesta contingente debido a la pandemia se logró institucionalizar. se incorporó en nuestro reglamento y es posible que de manera alternada, cuando los órganos de dirección así lo decidan, el Parlamento o la Cámara de Diputados de México pueda funcionar con todos presentes o con la modalidad semipresencial, es decir, algunos en el salón de sesiones u otros en sus casas o en sus oficinas. Esta solución se encuentra conviviendo y combatiendo con contingencias humanas. ¿A cuáles me refiero? Y que son propias más que de la tecnología del ethos, el comportamiento moral de los seres humanos. Creo que todos hemos escuchado aquí los diversos dilemas éticos y funcionales que plantean las nuevas tecnologías, diversas preocupaciones sumamente legítimas. Por ejemplo, todos padecemos eso, que las nuevas tecnologías puedan sustituir la actividad humana, que se genere desempleo y que la actividad humana ya no sea necesaria. Eso es cierto, pero se puede enfrentar y manejar con adaptabilidad, con resiliencia. Este dilema, otra vez, al igual que la democracia y su funcionamiento, no es nuevo. Hablaba yo de que los parlamentos, como los conocemos, tienen alrededor de 7, 8 siglos funcionando. Bueno, este problema de la sustitución de los humanos por las máquinas tampoco es nuevo. Se planteó con el cartismo y la revolución industrial hace 150 años. No tiene que ver con la inteligencia artificial últimamente. ¿Qué pasó en ese entonces? Las personas aprendieron a hacer otras cosas, no lo mismo que estaban haciendo las máquinas. Creo que es la misma actitud que debemos asumir ahora. Si las máquinas nos van a ayudar a hacer algunas cosas, nosotros tenemos que adaptarnos y enfatizar uno de los principios de la inteligencia artificial, que por cierto desarrolló muy bien Fortis en el estudio que amablemente nos distribuyó, supervisión humana. Las máquinas nos van a ayudar, sí, pero siempre bajo nuestra supervisión. ¿Qué es lo que hace la inteligencia artificial y la innovación tecnológica ya en los parlamentos? Ya nos ayudan a traducir, ya nos ayudan a compilar información, a ubicarla. Aquí he escuchado interesantes exposiciones de compañeros especialistas que tienen muy analizados la forma en la que el software de la inteligencia artificial puede ayudar a detectar cierta información útil para el debate. ¿Para qué más nos ayuda? Por ejemplo, para realizar o explicar la actividad parlamentaria a la ciudadanía. Eso ayuda a generar legitimidad. ¿Cuáles son las ventanas de oportunidad que la inteligencia artificial ofrece? ¿Qué es lo que todavía no hace o que apenas está haciendo de manera incipiente? Por ejemplo, nos podría ayudar a ubicar lagunas legislativas. ¿Qué es lo que le falta a la ley? Nos podría ayudar, por ejemplo, a ubicar una correspondencia entre lo que se debate y lo que se decide. Es muy común y yo creo todos aquí hemos presenciado casos de ese tipo en los que los representantes populares están discutiendo una cosa, intercambian acusaciones, pero la decisión que están tomando es otra completamente distinta. Utilizan la tribuna política para intercambiar insultos, acusaciones o cualquier otra cosa y la decisión que están tomando es otra. Que quede registro de eso y que quede claro que la decisión que se está tomando, la decisión pública, corresponde con lo que se debatió. Ahí es donde se encuentra una gran ventana de oportunidad para la inteligencia artificial. Otro elemento más técnico todavía, y esto lo digo a propósito, por ejemplo, y tiene que ver con las cortes constitucionales o con la actividad de los jueces. Es propio de las democracias constitucionales que los jueces revisen la constitucionalidad de la ley. Bueno, en el debate de la ley, cuando se estaba haciendo la ley, se hicieron advertencias discursivas de la constitucionalidad de la norma. La inteligencia artificial, si la enseñamos, si la entrenamos, puede detectar esas advertencias discursivas sobre riesgos de inconstitucionalidad de la ley. Y eso puede impactar ya no solo en la actividad del Parlamento, sino incluso en la actividad de los jueces cuando estén revisando la constitucionalidad de la norma. Por último, y una última de tantas innovaciones a las que nos podría ayudar la inteligencia artificial. La evaluación de la ley. ¿Cómo está operando las decisiones de los parlamentos en la realidad? ¿Lo sabemos? ¿A quién le corresponde revisarlo? ¿A los jueces, a la administración o al propio parlamento? La inteligencia artificial puede ser una herramienta que nos auxilie en eso. Los retos que tiene el Parlamento, insisto, no son nuevos. Mencionaba yo ejemplos históricos y son problemas que son visibles desde hace cientos de años. Me parece que la inteligencia artificial puede ser una herramienta que nos auxilia a enfrentar esos retos. La inteligencia artificial no está creando esos problemas. La inteligencia artificial, por ejemplo, no genera ilegitimidad de los parlamentos, que es un problema constante en todas las democracias de sus parlamentos. Todos los parlamentos son cuestionados y criticados por la opinión pública. ¿Es responsabilidad de la inteligencia artificial? No, pero puede ayudarnos a solucionarlo. La inteligencia artificial puede ayudarnos a acercar el Parlamento a la ciudadanía. ¿Por qué la ciudadanía cuestiona y critica a los parlamentos o a parlamentarios en particular? Porque no saben lo que hacen o muchas veces no se entiende lo que se está haciendo. La inteligencia artificial es una herramienta para eso. Otro riesgo, bien se dijo aquí y me parece muy loable que se tengan esas preocupaciones. La forma en la que la inteligencia artificial puede sustituir la actividad humana. Me parece que los seres humanos, las personas, las sociedades, aún utilizando la inteligencia artificial, no debemos de perder de vista que siempre, siempre debe de ser una herramienta. Por eso nunca debemos de abdicar de nuestra racionalidad. Nunca debemos de encargarle, es mi opinión, encargarle la confección de un discurso político a la inteligencia artificial. Podemos encargarle datos, pero no el discurso. ¿Por qué razón? Porque el discurso político en el Parlamento constituye las razones de la decisión que va a tomar el Parlamento. ¿Cómo le vamos a encargar a una máquina que dé las razones que debe de decir el representante popular? Tampoco se le debe de encargar enteramente la confección de un proyecto legislativo, porque la ley constituye no solo la expresión de la representación popular, la expresión de la soberanía, sino la decisión de un ente político. No debe de ser la decisión de una herramienta tecnológica, pero nos puede ayudar. En concreto, yo lo resumiría diciendo que la inteligencia artificial, la innovación tecnológica deben de ser herramientas e insisto, nunca debemos de renunciar o abdicar al uso de nuestra racionalidad. Muchas gracias, Luis.
Muchas gracias, Klaus, for your opening presentation. I have prepared a few questions to all of you, but for the sake of time, and I wish to give you one last minute also to say your final message, I'll ask for you to keep your answers between 3 and 4 minutes, and then we can have one final minute for final considerations. Grant, I'd like to start with you. In your presentation, you described how AI can analyze large collections of legislative data and documents, extracting drafting rules and information models, and significantly accelerate the configuration of different parliamentary information. So, for many parliaments and legislatures, the complexity of structuring their data have historically been a major barrier to their modernization and to the use of such different tools. So my question to you, very objectively, and for you to share on a more practical base that you have in your experience, how could AI assisted document analysis change the accessibility on how can parliaments modernize, even with their struggle in structuring their data?
Thanks, Luis. Years ago, I gave a presentation on a comantoso at the U.S. Capitol. At the end, Daniel Schulman came up to me and he said, "Now I know why you're in this field. You want to own the data across the world." That's maybe not quite the way to put it, but I come from a field where standards were common in electronic design automation. I saw the value of having automation that was having standards that crossed the whole industry, and what would happen when the costs were being borne by the whole field, not by one company or one institution alone. I thought this would happen in this field very quickly, but it hasn't. And after 2 decades, we've hardly made any progress at all. And the reason is that there's one barrier to entry. It is too difficult, it's too complex for smaller jurisdictions to be able to adopt common standards. Now we have that capability, and I think that's going to change the way this field works. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grant. Klaus, my following question, I would like to start a trend on discussing the principles of the legislative process, or what I call the dual legislative process, and how can AI strengthen those principles. And as you mentioned, the Bundesrat has recently implemented an AI supported system to assist the counting of votes by hand during the procedures, which I think is a very interesting example of technology being used not to replace the tradition in our parliaments, but rather to preserve it, preserve those traditions that are important to us. And after all, the parliament could simply have adopted a fully electronic voting system, as we saw here at the Erectus, in pursuit of a greater efficiency. So I'd like to ask, in your view, as parliaments are increasingly trying to integrate AI and other emerging technologies, which traditional elements of legislative practice remain essential to preserve in order to maintain the reason to be of the parliamentary institution?
Yes, thank you, Luis. Before answering the question, I'd like to tell you about a conference the Bundesrat hosted 10 years ago, in 2016, within the framework of the ECPRD. The conference was called Parliaments on the Net, and the keynote speaker was a futurist researcher who gave us a presentation with the title Parliaments in 25 Years. And first thing he predicted, there will still be parliaments. We said, okay. There will still be parliamentary buildings, although you will not necessarily be working there anymore. There will be plenary and committee meetings, although in new formats, virtual discussions, algorithmic voting, members not necessarily being present in the plenary hall, because you can use hologram technology, projecting a member into the chamber, giving the impression he's sitting at his place, raising his hands for votes, giving speeches, walking around, and although he or she is somewhere else. We were impressed and at the same time concerned by this vision, and that was 10 years ago, and it already gave us a preview of what is possible today and what might be possible in the next years. So the use of new technologies promises efficiency, modernization in parliamentary procedures, but it's also a challenge for parliamentary democracy, because technology may transform how parliaments function, but in my opinion, it must never replace what gives parliamentary democracy its legitimacy, its humanity, and also its representative character. And this is all the more true when you look around the world with political developments in some countries and growing disillusionment with politics among the public, that parliamentary democracy is under pressure, and that is a challenge for us where we have to react. And the question is not whether technology should be integrated into parliamentary procedure and practice. It certainly should, but which traditional elements, as Luis said, should be preserved in the future to remain the character of representative democracy. And the first thing which is essential in my view is parliamentary debate, including plenary and committee meetings, preferably through in-person meetings. Admittedly, the COVID pandemic has provided us with tools for virtual meetings, hybrid meetings, but however, these should be limited to exceptional cases. In Germany, for example, only committee meetings in the Bundestag and the Bundesrat can be held virtually or in hybrid format, not the plenary meetings. They have to be held in person. And there's a reason for it, because Parliament is a forum for discussion, exchange of ideas, compromise. Technical solutions and tools can summarize arguments, generate policy options, process data more efficiently, but they cannot replicate moral judgment, political accountability, and the lived experiences that elected representatives bring into the debate. You have to consider citizens. They elect human beings into parliament, not algorithms. And a genuine parliamentary debate allows an exchange of ideas, which also gives room for minority judgments, minority opinions, which may not be in line with data-driven majorities. And if legislative decision-making becomes overly automated, we risk reducing democracy to technical optimization rather than collective human judgment. And therefore, the debate in parliaments will remain one of the core elements which will have to be preserved. Other traditional elements which in my view shall be preserved are the convening of the parliament, decision when, how, the scheduling of sessions, the drafting of the agendas, defining the key topics for the parliamentary debate. This should be done by human beings, not by machine systems. Then the chairing of sessions, opening, suspension of meetings, decision when to suspend a meeting, the conduct of the agenda, granting and withdrawing the floor, allocation of speaking time. You can use technical solutions doing this, offering you a mathematical solution, but in the end, when human beings do it, they respect minority positions. They guarantee that even opposition parties and minorities have the right to voice their interests in the parliamentary debate. And very important measures to call for order in the parliament. This must be done by the speaker, preferably by human beings. Then another element, the right to ask questions. Some of my colleagues, some of you have pointed that out. It's very important. Then voting procedure, as we said. Direct voting with members casting their own vote and no automated political decisions, no algorithmic voting. And therefore, in the Bundesrat, we opted for this solution that we could still preserve our tradition by the voting by a show of hands. That was important. And therefore, one technical company offered us the solution with detection, motion detection, and the possibility to vote by show of hands and to continue our traditional voting procedure. And the last principle which should be obtained is the public nature of parliamentary meetings, possibility of hearings and of citizens' participation. AI tools can help explaining legislation, can summarize political debate, answer questions citizens have more quickly, but at the same time, this digital and technical participation should only complement political dialogue with our citizens and not replace it. So therefore, I think I've often heard that these traditional parliamentary rules and procedures, they're sometimes viewed as outdated formalities from another time. But in realities, in my opinion, they are safeguards of democratic legitimacy, and they should be preserved in our systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus, for your comments. Khalil, also for you, my next question would like to deep dive on the points that you brought on public participation and transparency, and being very direct to you. How can we use AI not only to foster those principles, for example, public participation, but how can we use artificial intelligence to make this participation meaningful to the legislative process? How can we use these inputs from the citizens in a meaningful way, in a way that helps the quality of the legislative process, and in a way that provides us more evidence for parliamentary discussions? If you like to share that, also in 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Luis. I think, as we said earlier on, I think common to many of us, Parliament engine is always committees. And committees, by design, they carry out the most significant part of oversight and scrutiny. So when you have committees that are much more empowered from decision support tools like AI, data gathering, intelligence synthesis of information, it will go a long way in terms of ensuring that we don't only look at public participation and transparency in an abstract fashion, but much more to regard them as the core foundational aspect of ensuring parliamentary legitimacy as well as due process. So application of these systems must be seen to be complementing those foundational aspects. The second part, I mentioned earlier on, parliaments don't lack public input. We don't. We get all sorts of input in our processes and so on. But the science behind what we do with that input is what is necessary as we deepen our democracy and so on. So the ability to process, analyze, and meaningfully incorporate these is very important to strengthen oversight, but also enhance how people view our work as parliament. We had a contentious legislation around including citizens around health, which almost similar to US. I think there was some contentious bill at some stage, including other communities that otherwise they were not affordable. With us, we have 64 million people, and almost 6 million people have access to quality medical care. Like they have to go for health insurance. So we have now started a new legislation that was highly contentious, and it's still in courts now because people feel that they were not adequately supported. And those who have got resources, they sponsor each other. They go to different areas, repeat inputs right across. So when you have members receiving all of these issues, the question is, how do we make sure that we have systems to support the evaluation of the impact of legislation such that we can easily pick recurring themes? What are the things that we can use to support committees to look at socioeconomic data, the policy evidence of those, but also look at what are the aspects of these laws that create recurring consensus themes? Which ones require people to go further so that researchers know what to do? So we think that even if everything was not included, committees can also get better insights from citizens using AI and make sure that frustration of citizens when they submit comments does not translate into people saying, but we participated, but there was not even a feedback loop around that. So we are implementing those measures so that we can deepen our participation. The last aspect I want to raise is that with AI, the key issue will be how we shift to impacts around using data. So it's not how many times people give us data, but what type of impacts we have even post-legislative scrutiny that we can utilize around that, so that we can combine citizen perspectives with research-informed comparative legislative practices and so on. So our challenge is not only about having a digital parliament, in my view. It's more about how do we utilize artificial intelligence to give us intelligent parliaments that are much more able to be driven by insights, but also allow that public participation must lead to meaningful impact. And last but not least, I think AI is not that it will allow more people to speak. It will help us to do that. But the challenge for parliaments will be how do we help legislatures listen better, understand more deeply, and legislate more effectively for the people. That will enhance the quality of our democracy. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Khalid, for your contributions. Hugo, I'd like to bring to you. Well, I've been trying to follow a logic in our discussion, which is starting with the principles of the dual legislative process, starting with efficiency, going to keeping the traditions, keeping the transparency and the participation, and also the evidence-based legislative process. If you would like to go to the last principle, which I consider to be fundamental, which is the rule-based legislative process, the legislative process based on the rules of procedure, on the precedents. And as Grant mentioned in the beginning of our panel, AI has the capacity to analyze vast amounts of data, and we can use that for our benefit. We can analyze bills, different proposals. We can analyze the parliamentary rules, the constitutional requirements, the legislative precedents accumulated over the years or the centuries. So, from your perspective, how can these technologies strengthen this principle of the rule-based legislative process? What are your thoughts to this? And if you want to share any experience on what you're doing in Mexico, also in 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Gracias, Luis. Aquí en la charla a lo largo de estos días, me parece que fue el día de ayer, Sara Fernández de Portugal contaba el caso de cómo desde que tiene ordenador, disculpe Sara por tomar el ejemplo, pero desde que tiene ordenador, sí, por alusión, desde que tiene ordenador dice que su letra es muy mala. Todos podemos contar o tener una experiencia de cómo la tecnología ha modificado la forma en la que procesamos distintos retos cotidianos. Por ejemplo, yo soy de la generación en la que aprendí el trazado, las rutas en la Ciudad de México con un mapa escrito. Desde que usamos Waze, ya hay jóvenes que uno les pregunta una dirección y no saben, ¿no? Ya no saben dar indicaciones de cómo llegar a ciertos puntos. Igual nos pasa, la mayoría de los que estamos aquí, venimos de la época de los teléfonos de disco o lo que tecleábamos, ¿no? Y nos sabíamos de memoria los números. Ahora, eso es imposible. Pedimos números telefónicos y hasta sacamos el QR para WhatsApp. Creo que esa es una muestra, en pequeños ejemplos muy inofensivos, de qué es lo que le debemos de permitir a la tecnología y qué no le debemos de permitir. No hay ningún problema en la que si ya no me sé mi número, te paso mi QR. ¿Qué es lo que no debemos de permitir? Que, por ejemplo, la IA nos diga qué le vamos a preguntar como representante popular a un funcionario público que concurre en función de control parlamentario a una asamblea. No estoy diciendo que no ocupemos la inteligencia artificial. Insisto, creo que una de las premisas fundamentales, en mi opinión, es que nunca pierda la naturaleza de ser una herramienta, pero no un sustituto. Es cierto, podemos allegarnos de acervo informativo, podemos analizar documentos para saber qué preguntarle al ministro de Salud o al ministro de Medio Ambiente, pero no pedirle la pregunta que le voy a hacer en una comparecencia tan importante a un funcionario de alto nivel. ¿Qué es lo que ya está pasando en muchos parlamentos y a partir de las experiencias escritas y que he recogido en esta importante reunión? Creo que podemos derivar hacia el procedimiento legislativo que la inteligencia artificial puede empezar a ayudarnos, no solo con el camino ya recorrido, para, insisto, hacer traducciones, sintetizar información, sintetizar documentos legales. Creo que podemos encargarle ahora a la inteligencia artificial y debemos entrenarla y enseñarle que nos ayude cómo está funcionando la ley en realidad. Podemos enseñar y entrenar a la inteligencia artificial de cómo hacer más coherente el discurso político con la decisión pública. Insisto, no quiero dejar de enfatizarlo, aun cuando ya lo he retomado. Aquí otro compañero, otra alusión personal, escuchaba un agudo e inteligente comentario de mi querido amigo Ludovic Delfín, que decía que la inteligencia artificial no es un monstruo, ¿no? Que tiene temor, en fin. me parece muy sensato tomarlo así, aun cuando no debemos de perder de vista el debate sobre la inteligencia artificial general, lo que los especialistas llaman esa inteligencia artificial que en algún momento puede tener la capacidad de aprender y de hacer las cosas mejor que las mentes más inteligentes sobre el planeta. No debemos de perder de vista eso. Por el momento sigue siendo una herramienta, no dejemos de verlo como una herramienta. El peligro está no en que haga las cosas mejor que nosotros, el peligro está en que nosotros le deleguemos a esa herramienta que haga las cosas no mejor que nosotros, sino en lugar de nosotros. Para aterrizar la respuesta a la muy amable pregunta de Luis, creo que la regulación de la inteligencia artificial debe de ser paulatina a través de soft law, tiene que ser de manera cautelar todavía con ciertas precauciones. Creo que podemos adoptar todavía directrices, códigos de ética, no todavía normas, sin que sea necesariamente prohibitivo que adoptemos ordenamientos legales, pero yo lo sintetizaría con tres formas para una incipiente regulación de la inteligencia artificial. Tiene que ser con soft law, o sea, directivas, directrices, códigos de ética. Tiene que haber cautela, tiene que ser de manera progresiva y en ámbitos pequeños todavía no tenemos que resolver las grandes cuestiones del Parlamento con la inteligencia artificial. Y tercero, con pedagogía. Tenemos que explicar y comunicar para qué sirve y cómo funciona la inteligencia artificial. Porque si no comunicamos, no explicamos, va a ser muy difícil que se adopte. Gracias, Luis.
Muchas gracias, Hugo de Rosas. Thank you very much for your comments. Colleagues, we are reaching the end of our panel. I really want to give you a very, very brief time. We are way beyond our time schedule here, but I wanted to recognize you for one or two phrases to conclude in 30 seconds. I'll start with you, Grant. Would you like to say a final message on today's topic?
Yes. Excuse me. Quite simply, I think that as we learned, there are a lot of capabilities, AI capabilities coming available, and they aren't always going to provide expected answers. In our case, we discovered something that we hadn't expected to happen would suddenly be possible. So it's a matter of being creative and seeing what we can now do that we couldn't do in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant, for your contribution. Holil, also in one or two phrases, very briefly, your final message to the colleagues.
Today we're gathered here talking about AI and the importance of how it will help us work better. There's also a natural uncertainty by human beings. Is it here to replace us and so on? But why are we here talking about AI? It's because it's designed by people. So central to any of these data, intelligence, and algorithm is the need for us to maintain a human oversight over. So we must always make sure that at the discourse in our parliaments, we don't have runaway conversations about will we replace people and so on. There must always be people at the center of systems, because balancing technical failures will still require a human being to deal with that. So those investments must be seen as complementing human capabilities to make us work better, as opposed to replacement scale that we always see being bandied about. Thanks.
Thank you, Holil, for your final contribution. Klaus, would you like to share your final contribution? Also, one or two sentences, please.
Yes, I think we all agree that technical developments in AI can provide assistance. They can make our parliaments, our work more efficient. And I liked one expression Xolile used, is that they make intelligent parliaments. And this I found a very good expression, Xolile. Thank you for this idea. The keyword is parliamentary democracy, preserving it. And so ultimately every parliamentary decision, whether procedural, substantive or political in nature, should remain subject to human accountability. That's something we can all agree upon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus. Hugo, would you like to share your final contribution? One or two sentences also, please.
Muchas gracias, Luis. Lo resumiría en muy pocas palabras. Si logramos mantener la brújula ética en la utilización de la inteligencia artificial, va a ser más fácil y posible que hacer de la democracia que sea más eficaz, legítima y poder defenderla.
Muchas gracias, Hugo. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of you for your patience and for receiving us today. And I yield back the floor to our host. Thank you.